perhaps. So good afternoon. This table is quiet. Good afternoon. So this is the graveyard shift, and no pressure, guys. So I am actually with some very illustrious speakers, but as they said, there's no pressure. So the pressure could be on all of us, and yet there's no pressure. So here's the flow. I think, first of all, I have the easiest task. I'll be the timekeeper, and perhaps let all the talking, speaking be done by my other illustrious panelists. Here's the order. We'll go. We'll have some 10, 12 minutes of discussions, and maybe setting the stage by me. Then we'll have Atul share his perspectives, and then followed by Prashant and also Rajesh. Please be aware, some of us are using presentation, some of us are not, so you'll find some alternate between presentation and talk. The other thing is, we've agreed that when it's 2 minutes left, you'll find some chiming the glass. It's an indication that time's up, or you've got to kind of wind up your discussion. But at this moment, I might need you to do that for me. So about 12 minutes or so from right now, if you can, any one of you can chime the glass. So 12 minutes from now, who will do that? Anybody? Any volunteers? You will do that? Thank you. Be honest about it. Even though you're in the flow, so do chime in. This topic, very coincidentally, I also had the good fortune of talking about last year. And so in a lot of ways, I said, in case any one of you were sitting last year, let me be different, and sort of went through my notes. And therefore, first thing is, let me drop my presentation. We'll talk a little bit. So let me start with a story. And this story is from medieval England, where the community was staying in a large castle. And you would appreciate around the castle there will be a moat. So moat has some water, crocodiles, etc. You want to make it as dangerous, you can add it, because right now we are in the imagination, world of imagination. So there's a moat, there's a castle, 4,000, 5,000 people living within that castle. And yet, every 10 days, there would be a giant which would appear, this giant would appear outside the castle. And guess what, as is their want, they would take away your cattle, sometimes even pick up people, kill, slaughter. And again, as with folklore, some truth, some rumors. Somebody said he's a carnivore, somebody said a man-eater. So all sorts of stories about this giant. And that's how the people lived on for years and years and years. Till one fine day, a brave young woman picked up the sword, said, let the castle doors be open, and the door fell on the moat. She walked through it to the other side, kept walking towards the giant, till, lo and behold, that's where surprise happened. The giant suddenly started to shrink. So as she was walking towards the giant began to shrink. And then she was face to face, eyeball to eyeball, and suddenly actually the giant was shorter than her. It was about 5 feet. And that's where the story ends. Are you out of it? Snap. So out of the story now. Back into this session. This session is about learning and development and integral competency for future CEOs. What is the story to do with this topic? Who's the CEO here, and who's the brave HR person in my story? Who's the CEO and who's the brave HR person? No guesses, right? CEO the monster, absolutely. And the lady who walked up was a brave HR person. And what was really, where am I going with this thought?
I think they're normally unapproachable and cannot be met at the same eye level. So maybe she braved up and all that stuff.
Thank you so much. What's her name?
Amrita.
You're a background. She has articulated what all of you had in mind. And clearly that's the story. So my story or my appeal through this is really how can HR and the CEO, how can they align on the learning agenda? And I am really, so therefore, you'll find a lot of our stories will come from examples from our organizations, and some very well-respected organizations represented here. But my story is around how can this lady, how can the brave young lady engage with the CEO? And let me resort to a few research by a gentleman called Mark Hillo, and he talks about 6 ways in which the lady can engage the CEO. The very first, and I'll also talk about some experiences where we have failed in Tata Motors, because it's not fair to give you a huge framework and not share with you what we are doing well and what perhaps we're not doing well. But bear with me, when the time strikes, I will stop, and the rest of the questions we can take up in the Q&A session. So broadly 60 minutes of talking and then 30 minutes of Q&A is how we proposed. And so the first thing, in terms of engagement, how can we engage the giant, is around the CEO as a visionary for learning. And I'll therefore also ask you a few questions as well along the way. Are you engaging, or is the CEO a visionary for learning in your organization? What has personally he or she assigned as an agenda for learning? And I'll probably talk about, that's one area where I can humbly and truthfully state that we are Tata Motors. We have at least one item, one huge perspective, which is coming directly from the CEO. It's undiluted along the way, and therefore it stems there. And we'll talk about that. It is about setting a new tone for culture, and we call it the ACEs. Some of it is also getting mentioned in the media as a new way that Tata Motors wants to change. But clearly, CEO as a visionary for that L&D agenda is one way in which the brave young woman can engage with the giant. The second is CEO as a sponsor, and this is a little different from CEO as a visionary. There's already an ongoing agenda going. Is she standing up and sharing and talking on behalf and being the sponsor, the evangelist, the socializer of that particular agenda? Or is it left to the poor HR head and his one or two colleagues, people like you and me, who's carrying the whole torch forward? So clearly that's the second question. We've got to put hand to our heart and say if CEO is also a sponsor of one important learning / HR agenda, where he's the sponsor, he's promoting it, he's the promoter, he's the marketeer of that agenda. That's the second question we've got to ask. The third is about governance. Is he a governor? Is he involved, or is she involved in looking at some metrics? All of us have metrics, right? We report certain metrics. Some lag, some lead indicators. We are almost always shy about ROI, right? Always very hesitant, always very defensive about ROI. But are those metrics being looked at? Is he the sponsor of this monthly, quarterly, 6-monthly, whatever meeting you have? We at Tata Motors have a learning advisory council where we are answerable once in 6 months to, so the MD -1 level meet and they review data. They review data and not the spiel which all of us make. This is the program, this is what we did, this is how many leaders we produced. It's really a hardcore data-based meeting. So I've spoken about 3 ways in which the brave lady can engage with the CEO. CEO as a visionary, where he starts a particular initiative. A CEO as a sponsor, where he's evangelizing a particular initiative. A CEO as a governor, where he's actually overseeing, looking at, evaluating some metrics. Brings me to the third point, which again I think is a little bit where we don't have much success here yet. CEO as a subject matter expert. You'll be surprised how approachable they are. In my own experience, nobody has asked them. We've often figured out that the giant is really a giant. But when you approach them, what is it that you can provide? What is it that you can give? Very often they have lots to give inside. There's a lot of subject matter expertise. Remember, they're running a company. We are running just a function. So therefore, their perspectives, their experiences, but nobody's asked. We never said, can you lead this function? Can you lead this particular? Can I delve into your mind? Can we spend time with you to, So just a question or an example. We are currently developing a program on strategic thinking. All of us believe we are so consumed by the quarter, we are so consumed by the month, we are so consumed by the week that we are not able to look into the year. So therefore, this whole ability in general managers to be able to think 2 years out, to think what if, create scenarios. There we thought we needed expertise, and like all other professionals, where do we go? What do you think when you want to develop a program of strategic thinking? Where will you go? Like who? Of course, we've tapped the McKinsey's and all the big 4 and the big 5 and all the Harvard professors, but guess what? We forgot to tap the CEO. So the point is does he have the subject matter expertise? Does he or our case, we found luckily it's there. So now the question of engagement is very different. So CEO as a subject matter expert. And the second last is the CEO as a faculty. How many of your CEOs teach? It's again intuitive. So put your hand to your heart. Can he teach? Of course he can teach. Can she teach? Of course she can teach. Have you asked? So the giant was too big. Right? So CEO as a faculty, I think we've succeeded. But ask me CEO as a coach and a mentor, which is another extension of the same logic. That's something we're still struggling to get them to find time to mentor some of our high potentials, etc. But CEO as a faculty, certainly we are getting them to step into classroom. That's different from CEO as a subject matter expert, where he's sharing content, he's sharing what's inside his head. And the last one is, of course, the biggest one sometimes, which is the CEO as a learner, as a role model. You see him learning. You see, otherwise, what we found is if the CEO is not seen learning, then the next level, the direct reports, the functional heads, will dismiss HR, L&D, etc. So those are some questions and those are some pointers, which I thought I'd share with you. And how are we doing on time? Okay. Sure. So while that is what I wanted to share, mostly questions, and I'm really happy to give some more time back to Atul. Perhaps he has a presentation, and then we can meet on the other side during the Q&A round. So thank you all for listening.